You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. Before we dive in, let me make my standard confession. My Hebrew and French pronunciations are about as consistent as someone trying to do karaoke with subtitles that are one beat behind the music. Sometimes I nail it, sometimes it sounds like I'm ordering a croissant in Klingon. So, with that warning out of the way, today's topic is the Dreyfus Affair. And no, it's not a soap opera or a reality TV scandal, though it had all the drama of both. Instead, it was one of the most infamous political and anti-Semitic episodes in modern history, rocking France in the late 19th century. Imagine a courtroom drama mixed with Twitter-level outrage, except without the internet, which might have actually made things worse. This story shaped Jewish identity, influenced Zionism, and still echoes in how we think about justice today. So buckle up, because this one's got spies, secrets, and way too much handwriting analysis. The Dreyfus Affair begins in 1894, when Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer in the French army, was accused of passing military secrets to Germany. Sounds like a spy thriller, right? Except, spoiler alert, Dreyfus was innocent. He was the only Jewish officer on the French general staff, and that made him an easy scapegoat for people already marinating in anti-Semitism. Imagine being the one guy in the office who always brings tuna sandwiches, and when the break room stinks, everyone automatically blames you. Only here, instead of a smelly fridge, it was accusations of treason. The evidence was flimsy, a piece of paper known as the bordereau, basically a shopping list of secrets supposedly in his handwriting. The army needed a fall guy, and Dreyfus fit the part. He was quickly convicted in a closed-door military trial, stripped of his rank in a humiliating public ceremony, and sent to Devil's Island, a remote penal colony where survival was about as fun as living inside a mosquito net with holes. To understand why this case blew up, we need to zoom out on France in the late 1800s. The country was still licking its wounds from losing the Franco-Prussian War in 1871, and people were paranoid about German spies everywhere. Nationalism was running hot, like social media outrage during a celebrity breakup. At the same time, anti-Semitism in Europe was spiking. Jews were accused of being outsiders, disloyal, too rich, too poor, you name it. Someone was mad about it. In France, where the revolution had promised liberty, equality, and fraternity, Jews thought they were finally accepted as full citizens. But the Dreyfus case revealed how shallow that acceptance was. For many French people, Dreyfus wasn't just an officer. He was a symbol of Jewish otherness. His trial became a stage for deeper anxieties about national identity, loyalty, and who belonged. Think of it like one of those family holiday dinners where an argument about cranberry sauce suddenly turns into World War III about politics and grudges from 10 years ago. Now, the evidence against Dreyfus was, let's say, creative. The prosecution brought in handwriting experts to compare the bordereau with samples of Dreyfus's writing. Problem was, the experts disagreed, and the ones who said it wasn't him got ignored. It was basically the 19th century version of, I saw it on YouTube, so it must be true. On top of that, the military suppressed anything that didn't fit their theory. The trial was secretive. The defense barely got a chance, and anti-Semitic cartoons flooded the press painting Dreyfus as a villain. It's the classic case of confirmation bias. Once the army decided he was guilty, every scrap of paper suddenly pointed to his guilt. Meanwhile, the real culprit, a French officer named Ferdinand Walsin Esterhazy, was chilling in the background like the actual villain in a Scooby-Doo episode. But for now, Dreyfus was the one in shackles, and France seemed happy to keep it that way. So how did the truth come out? Enter Colonel Georges Picquart, a French intelligence officer who might as well be the unsung hero of the story. In 1896, he discovered evidence that Esterhazy, not Dreyfus, was the real spy. Now, here's where it gets juicy. When Picquart tried to tell his superiors, instead of saying, "Thank you for saving the Republic," they basically said, "Shh, don't ruin the narrative." The army didn't want to admit it had railroaded an innocent man, so they transferred Picquart to a remote post and tried to silence him. It's like when a company discovers its phone batteries explode but decides to bury the memo rather than recall the product. But word eventually leaked out. And people started whispering that maybe, just maybe, Dreyfus had been framed. Suddenly, the case became not just about one officer, but about truth, justice, and whether institutions could be trusted. Spoiler, the institutions did not come out looking great. Things really exploded in 1898 when the famous writer Émile Zola published his open letter J'accuse on the front page of a Paris newspaper. The title means I accuse, and Zola went full mic drop mode, calling out the army, the government, and basically everyone involved in the cover-up. Imagine if a Pulitzer Prize-winning author wrote a viral Substack today accusing the Pentagon of lying. It was that level of impact. Zola's letter turned the Dreyfus Affair into a national obsession, splitting France into two camps: the Dreyfusards, who believed in his innocence, and the anti-Dreyfusards, who insisted he was guilty and usually sprinkled in some anti-Semitism for flavor. Families were divided, friendships ended, and the press turned it into the story of the decade. Zola himself got convicted of libel and fled to England for a while, but his words lit a fire that could not be put out. France wasn't just arguing about one officer, it was arguing about the soul of the Republic. After years of public battles, new trials, and legal ping-pong, Dreyfus was finally exonerated in 1906, 12 years after his initial conviction. By then, he had spent years in brutal exile on Devil's Island, and though he was reinstated in the army, the damage was done. The affair left deep scars on French society, but it also became a defining moment in the history of anti-Semitism. For Jews around the world, it was proof that even in supposedly enlightened and modern countries, prejudice could erupt and ruin lives. One of the most important ripple effects came from Theodor Herzl, a journalist covering the case. Watching crowds chant "Death to the Jews" in Paris convinced him that assimilation wasn't enough, and Jews needed a homeland of their own. That realization became the seed of modern political Zionism. In a strange twist, the injustice against Dreyfus helped spark a global movement that would reshape Jewish history in the 20th century. The Dreyfus Affair also left a lasting impact on how we think about justice, truth, and institutions. It showed what happens when prejudice and politics outweigh evidence, and how dangerous it is when powerful institutions refuse to admit mistakes. It's the kind of story that gets taught in law schools, history classes, and ethics seminars because it highlights the importance of transparency, accountability, and minority rights. For Jews in France, it was a wake-up call that full acceptance was still fragile. For non-Jews, it was a lesson that anti-Semitism wasn't just a fringe problem, but something baked into society. And for everyone, it was proof that sometimes standing up for what's right means going against the crowd, even when it's messy, unpopular, or lands you in court like Zola. Think of it as the ultimate reminder that justice isn't automatic. It's something people have to fight for, one accusation and one letter at a time. What makes the Dreyfus Affair still feel modern is how recognizable the dynamics are. Swap out telegrams for tweets, newspapers for TikTok, and handwriting experts for dodgy AI deepfakes, and you've basically got the same recipe for a public scandal today. A flawed system, a scapegoat, a media frenzy, and a society divided down the middle. It's the blueprint of modern controversy. The fact that anti-Semitic tropes were at the center of it all also shows how old prejudices can adapt to new times. Even after Dreyfus was cleared, anti-Semitism didn't just vanish. It lingered, feeding into later tragedies in Europe. That's why this case is more than just a French courtroom drama. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when fear, prejudice, and stubbornness take the wheel. And like all good cautionary tales, it comes with a moral. Never underestimate how much damage a bad call by powerful people can do, especially when fueled by hate. So to wrap it all up, the Dreyfus Affair wasn't just the story of one Jewish officer wrongfully convicted of treason. It was a national crisis that revealed the deep cracks in French society, exposed the persistence of anti-Semitism, and helped spark the idea of Jewish self-determination. It gave us iconic moments like Zola's J'accuse and cautionary lessons about bias in justice systems. And it reminds us that even in times and places where equality seems guaranteed, prejudice can bubble back to the surface when things get tense. It's history, but it's also a mirror, and sometimes what it reflects isn't pretty. Thanks for listening to this episode of Everything Jewish, 10 minutes at a time. If you enjoyed this story, please forward it to a friend who might like it, or leave a positive review so others can find the podcast. Until next time, remember, history is full of twists, turns, and scandals, and sometimes the biggest lessons come from the messiest stories.